Good afternoon and welcome to Full Sail Partners LinkedIn Live. My name is Sarah Gonnella. I am VP of Marketing and Sales at the firm, and we want to welcome you to Inside the Upgrade. Today, we're going to be chatting with Cate Phillips, who's going to do an introduction for us, as well as Brad Mathias. He is not only a former client, but also now on the consulting side. So all three of us have been working with clients to help them to navigate their upgrade path. And Brad has the unique perspective of also being a client and now as a consultant. And so we're so glad that you have joined us today. And we're here to get your questions and help you navigate the upgrade from Vision to Vantagepoint. And so, Cate, do you want to do a little bit of an introduction to yourself? Let the audience know who you are.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Sarah. So welcome, everyone. I'm thrilled to be here. My name is Cate Phillips. My title is Relationship Manager, which means a lot of things. But in terms of what we are discussing here today, I am usually the first person that corresponds with and communicates with our clients and our prospective clients when they are considering doing this upgrade, whether they want to tackle it in a unique way or they want to leverage our consulting services. I'm usually helping out on that front end.
Yeah. And Cate does a fabulous job on the front end of talking with our clients and really helping them to understand what our process is, the things that we have found to be successful. So if you haven't had a chance to talk to Cate, maybe just fill out a questionnaire so you can just chat with her.
Yep, we usually have a good time.
We do. All right, Brad, would you like to do an introduction to yourself?
Sure. My name is Brad Mathias. I'm a part-time senior consultant with Full Sail, and I just recently joined the company after being retired for a year and a half from Ware Malcolm, a very large architecture and engineering firm out of California, but they were international, lots of offices, lots of creativity. And my job here is a couple of you might have seen me on some Vantagepoint readiness review calls. I'm probably the second step after you meet with Cate now to venture into the world of Vision to Vantagepoint.
Perfect. And Brad, we're so excited to have you on board just because your overall enthusiasm and overall experience just really helps to help people from that first step to the second step of really starting the process. So today should be a great conversation. We want to start off with also a question for the audience. So if you can give us a yes if you are already on Vantagepoint, or a no if you're on Vision or another system. We just want to understand a little bit more about the audience that we're connecting with today so we can better guide our conversations to the things that are going to be important to you. And so while we're waiting for people to fill out that answer, so yes if they're on Vantagepoint and no if they're on Vision or another system, Cate, let's start with you. So when firms are looking to upgrade, what would you say is maybe one or two of the things that are most critical to consider as you're looking to upgrade from Vision to Vantagepoint?
Yeah, so thanks, Sarah. So there's a few things that really stand out. Something that I think is super important for clients to consider as they're looking towards Vantagepoint is the opportunities that it holds, right? So with all things, requiring change, there's always a positive or a negative, right? So on the positive side of this huge change is an opportunity to really optimize your system. So I can tell you, I have met with, hundreds of firms to talk about this or other consulting related to Vantagepoint. And I have yet to hear a firm that comes to that discussion and says, you know what? We are leveraging all of our ERP. We know that we are getting the biggest bang for our buck. It's just ERPs in general are complicated products. And so it is very reasonable to assume that you aren't leveraging all of it. And this upgrade is a great opportunity to optimize those systems. The other thing that I want to point out is this is, although we're going to talk a little bit more about fear as we continue down this discussion, because that's a big component of it. But this is something to do thoughtfully. So it's a strategic move. I really like to have folks focus on making this be an approach that's more around quality than quantity, or it's not so much quantity as much like, following a chronological timeline that you really believe, needs to be followed, when in reality, if you just follow the steps, walk the walk, and do the process, you'll get there when you should get there, when the testing is right, when you have confidence, like all of the stuff that's going to make this launch easier will come. You just have to do it in a really thoughtful, kind of strategic way.
All right. Brad, what are your thoughts on this? So when firms are looking to upgrade, what are one or two things that you think are most critical to consider?
I think my experience was we were growing constantly growing, and we were, I would say, a relatively broad user of vision. So we got very creative. We love to be creative, and we encouraged creativity, and the system allows for that. As you get closer to making a decision as to when you are going to move from vision to Vantagepoint, for us, it was a challenge to really stop developing. And the one thing that I had to keep in mind and didn't really realize till the end is I'm not my only IT's customer. And my guy always made me feel like I was his only customer, and he continued to pull that off, but very, very difficult from an overall company perspective unless you get buy-in way up top, because you got to slow those other initiatives down, because this is a big one. And things that didn't worry me too much, well, afterwards, it was things that are attached to your system. If you've got third-party softwares and things like that, those people have done excellent jobs of being ready for this. But I think the timing of when you choose to do this, and then what you do working up to that, is very, very important.
Yeah. And so if we look at some of those things, when you said the IT person helped you to feel like you were the only customer, but when we think about ERP, most people, I guess, coming from vision, a lot of times are so used to it being the accounting system. And so maybe you guys can also elaborate a little bit about your reflections on how important is it to bring other individuals beyond accounting into the process?
Go ahead, Cate.
Yeah, so that is hugely important, not just for change management, but for true alignment. So we suggest, our recommendation is that you have individuals representing kind of each of your business units. Those that would be interacting with the ERP. So for the standard architecture or engineering firm, it's typically, obviously people in finance, but then we need some kind of executive high-level support. If you can get your CEO or a COO involved and kind of to champion it to the rest of the leadership, that's terrific. You definitely need folks from the different departments. So you need someone on the sales and marketing side, whether or not you're using CRM. The ERP is still managing the entire project lifecycle, which always takes into account, sales and marketing and those projects that we're pursuing. And then project management is absolutely key. So, your ability to truly see project profitability has to start at the resource level, right? Understanding utilization of your people out in the field. So having those key areas represented really make for the alignment that you need across the organization.
Okay. I love that. And Brad, You can add some further reflections on that, but I also want to understand from you, when you reflect on the process as a client and now on the other side, what views are still the same and maybe what has also changed, now being on what I call the dark side of software, the consulting side of the house.
Well, I think the things that change that haven't changed is, as a client, your choice of how fast you get into Vantagepoint. And I mean, as far as, and Cate mentioned it, it's an opportunity for sure. And depending on how much time you give yourself, you can change some business practices or plan to leverage the software before you go on Vantagepoint, or depending on your time frame and what your current conditions are in your company, you really may want to slow all of that development down and then get on Vantagepoint if you have a shorter window. Let's say you have for whatever reason, you're going to move this year. Well, then it's already April, so it sounds like a lot of time, but depending on how big you are and how creative you are over time, there's different styles in everybody's vision databases if you've been around long enough. So, none of them were wrong, none of them were right. It was just a style at the time. And diversification causes you to go down all kinds of really cool roads. But then when you got to move over, when projects and opportunities get blended together, in our experience, we had a lot of history to clean up, and it was huge, but it's just what it is. And the thing that definitely changed now being on the other side is the fear factor. We were very fearful. I was very fearful. I'll speak for myself. I was very fearful of this change, and that's what it is. Systems designed for users and encourages users to use it. And we're all accounting people. How do we learn this thing? It's all very daunting. When you finally do it, you realize the fear was really unfounded. It truly is. And it's just human nature. But I can honestly say, being on this side of the fence, and when I was a client, Full Sail is a great team. That's why I'm here. And they can make it happen for you. We can make it happen for you. So yeah, fear is the biggest thing that is going to affect all of you. And if you can temper it down, it's just like any other fear. It goes away when you face it. So.
Yeah. And so I was taking a look at the audience and the things that they've said. Everybody said no, that they're not on Vantagepoint. So we do have a lot of individuals here that are still on Vision or maybe another system. And so you're mentioning fear, and you're sort of leading me into asking maybe the audience a question of, do you have specific fears that are keeping your firm from upgrading to Vantagepoint? We'd love to hear what those thoughts are so we could address them today. And so with that, Brad, if I can stay on this topic, change management, it's scary. And so what things have you seen firms do to deal with the fear of change?
We utilized training. We opted for some training very early on Vantagepoint while we were still on Vision and preparing and cleaning our data and all that. But we opted for some training, and it was essentially leader training or section training. We were trying to develop an expert in every area, whether it's billing or accounting or assets or whatever. We tried to train a trainer, and that actually worked really well. And so I think that early exposure to key people, like someone who might want to learn screen designer, something like that, or someone can start rewriting workflows, someone get used to how that goes in Vantagepoint. I think that just early training was our best solution to eliminate a lot of the fear.
Yeah.
Cate,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I think Brad covered the wisest thing to do, which is to, upskill yourselves and your people, and really get ready, right? Because nothing counters fear like confidence, right? The other thing that I think is super helpful with change management that is it's easier said than done. And a lot of people actually forget it, is to acknowledge the fear. Like, start talking about it. You know, we're all scared. We don't need to be scared in our little vacuums, you know, or in our little teams. Let's point it out and talk about it across the organization. This is huge. This is our ERP. This is something we hope to only change once every 10 years or more, right? So this is a significant change and a really great way to approach the fear that everyone inevitably has, is to acknowledge it, point it out. Let's talk about it. And let's, you know, you and your firm, you know your culture best, and, you know, your people will tell you what they need to feel better.
Yeah, I like that. So we have a lot of great comments that are coming in. And so Lisa, who's one of our consultants here, said, hey, you know, not maybe hint, leverage your resources. Think, you know, your friendly Full Sail Partners consultant to help you overcome the fear. And we have a fantastic team here that helps work to get those questions answered. So there were also some other comments. So cost is a big fear, not just the transition itself, but also the hardware updates, amount of time the process takes, also general fear of change. You know, you have a 50-year-old firm with founding principals still involved. You know, Brad, can we maybe hit upon this one? Because I think you might have some interesting perspective there.
I do. I came from a very large firm that, as I mentioned before, I thought I was IT's only customer, but they naturally have all kinds of things going on and initiatives and just keeping the system going and protecting our data. So cost of this project was competing with other costs of other projects. And so your relationship with IT is key. Your communication has to be really good with those people. You have to be their friend. They can't be your enemy. But cost always is a factor for us. It's a factor for everybody in everything they spend their money on, especially when you're growing, and then even more so if you're redacting a little bit. So it's key to have leadership commit to the project before you get too far. But as far as what it will actually cost you, you have a lot of control over that. And it just depends on how fast you want to get going on Vantagepoint. You could take, and we can help you determine what that will be. But there is cost involved. It isn't just the licenses. You've already got those, but you do have to get transitioned over to Vantagepoint, and then you do need some training. But you can determine how much that is depending on what approach you take to those two things. So I'd say that it's probably the biggest hurdle to get over, but it is one that you will have to get over it when you decide to make the change.
Okay. So fear, another person said custom reports, and Brad, I feel like you guys had custom reports.
Yes. We, as I mentioned before, we were very creative and encouraged that. We had literally thousands of custom reports, and it's because it's accumulation over years of someone needing just a little bit of a different version and not really having a central person or process to deliver information. We were very creative. We let people have what they wanted. If they had the authority, they could go in and get it, and they did. Going to Vantagepoint is a fantastic opportunity to clean up all of that. And to learn how to use searches instead of a new report for every single thing. And then in addition to that, Vantagepoint has some pretty cool dashboards that are run centrally rather than having individuals have to set it up, or you run around and set it up on 400 machines. It's managed centrally, and you can hand it out to 300 project managers at the same time, and they get all of their own individual data. So there's a lot of different ways, well, not a lot, but one significantly better way to get information to your end users than thousands of reports. So yes, it's a great opportunity to clean up those reports.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so someone else mentioned parity with vision. And so I'd be curious, and I added a question in there. Can you elaborate on the specific functionality? Because for us, for the most part,
Most things.
there is a solution for things. There are continuing to be some areas, but I'd be curious as to what specifically, because there might actually be a solution there. So Pat, if you can elaborate there, and then I also want to get into another thing that Pat had brought up. What is an optimal transition planning window, in your opinion? And so I'd also like to add in on that. Maybe, Cate, you could start off with, some firms come to us wanting to just take a fast track approach. So also, along with Pat's question of what's optimal, it's more about, I think, as you will discuss, what firms might consider that approach a fast track approach, and what firms probably shouldn't consider a fast track approach.
Yeah, definitely. And I did want to just also just touch upon the cost issue, just briefly, because I do think that this is a valuable thing to think about. So, time is money, right? So there's always a cost, and I think the person that mentioned this, acknowledged that, like, either our own time is a cost, or, our leadership, all of that. So it's really, this type of project is prime for outsourcing, a component of it, because this is something that your firm will only do once, in terms of configuring and setting up Vantagepoint. It's perfect to rely on experts. So whether you want to, work with Full Sail partners or another one of the great partners in the Deltek ecosystem, get some help. Don't do this alone. That will help. So that time is better spent by an expert than you trying to figure it out, right? Now, timing. The average for this upgrade is 6 months. Now, that's across, very small 10-person firms all the way up to very large firms like Ware Malcolm. So just like a lot of things when it comes to ERP and Deltek specifically, a lot of it depends on how you've been using the system, and what functionalities you're leveraging, the complexity of your database. So some firms are really well suited for where we've been calling a kind of a fast track approach to it. Those firms are ones that may feel most comfortable. They've kind of done their research internally on their change management issues. And so one of the instances where a firm might be well suited for a fast track is a firm that just wants to get there, and they want to do a like for like. So they want to just replace Vantagepoint functionality with how they're using Vision now. And most firms that are doing that are primarily the firms that are using Vision in the finance function only. They maybe don't have CRM, they don't have resource planning, they don't have a lot of workflows or other third-party, tie-ins. And for them, it's wise to just move to Vantagepoint and then consider other things later, because they don't know what they don't know, right? So if they can replace Vision with Vantagepoint with confidence on the finance side, then they have the opportunity to look at some other things down the road at a later phase. So those firms are often well suited for it. And then other firms that are well suited for it is even the big kind of growing firms, because there's so many acquisitions happening in the marketplace. Sometimes those acquisitions or those mergers or other things that are happening in the business place a priority on a timing. Like, we really need to be live by this quarter, because we know we're going to, let's say we're acquiring another firm that's already on Vantagepoint. We're not going to take them back to Vision for a while, right? Like, no, I mean, that does happen, but no one likes it. So, we would rather us go to Vantagepoint and merge their database in, at a later phase or something like that. So there's a couple of different reasons why a fast track might be the right approach. And the fast track projects here at Full Sail usually take from kind of the start of the first signature on the first agreement to going live. They usually are around 3 to 4 months. It does take a pretty focused approach to get the cleanup done. A lot of the heavy lifting is done early in the process to really make that timeline work.
Yeah, and I would also add in there, it's important to understand the current backlog and workload. So when Cate says, 3 to 4 months, that's, we're signing and we're figuring out when we're starting. That's not from let's sign, let's go. So I want to be very clear right now, because we do have a lot of firms right now that are in the process, and it's a backload. Like this is a popular thing right now. So I do want to be careful with making sure we're setting good expectations with people as they come to us.
And that's often discussed in our first call. So here's the thing is that we can't forecast into the future unless we know. So we have a group of clients that, might be in a backlog because they've signed and they've said, yeah, we're ready. But you come to us 2 months from now and the story might be slightly different. But one thing you can count on from Full Sail is that we will be really transparent. We have learned that it is in our best interest and our clients' best interest for everyone to be on the same page when it comes to scope, cost, and timing. Those and you all do the same in your businesses. We're all providing professional services. Everybody wants, to be paying for time and know what they're paying for and have that transparency.
Yeah. The other thing that I also wanted to emphasize that I've also seen is the number of security profiles that you have, because each security profile does need to be touched upon before you even open up the system, just because of the way some of the fields have moved around. So those are things to keep in mind. The amount of links that you have attached within your system, that might be something to consider. If you come to us and you have 10,000 plus links that are important to have within that system, that's also something to consider. And I think Cate mentioned this, a bunch of saved reports, a bunch of reports, because those are things to consider as well. And then the other thing that I would say that I always hear from Raina, Amanda, is the project creation process is one of the most critical areas, especially if you have CRM and resource planning, because you're going to be reimagining that process, just because you're having to relook at things because of the merging of different info centers becoming hubs. So those are just some of the other things to sort of consider. And so,
absolutely.
Brad, any other thoughts that you have on, change management fear, or maybe even approaches that firms might consider as they're looking at the upgrade?
Well, I think first I want to recognize that it makes a little bit of a difference whether you're hosted or you're on-prem. When we were on-prem, very large company, a lot of historical data. Full Sail has some seriously strong technical help with a guy named Heath Harris, and we even though we were on-prem and we have a very sophisticated IT department, the depth of Heath Harris and his team was critical in us getting everything configured correctly for Vantagepoint that isn't necessarily the same as Vision. So being on-prem gives you some advantages, but then also some disadvantages. The disadvantage, well, I guess the advantages to being hosted is, you have some restrictions on how creative you can be over time, and the whole technical side of it's managed for you. But on-prem, Full Sail doesn't know until you ask them to look what kind of hardware you have, whether you have, everything configured correctly to leverage the system correctly. Full Sail was invaluable in that respect. So if you're on-prem, don't think you're alone on the technical side. You can get help. And then just timing. If you choose or need to be quick on moving to Vantagepoint, get together with the other leaders who demand time from your IT department and your marketing team and your project accounting team, because it takes time to get this thing over and running when you throw the switch. It's a significantly broader opportunity for you to use things, and you got to resist that if you need to be fast. If you have time, you can schedule this thing out to the end of 25 if it meets your schedules. And if you have discipline, and it's hard to have discipline when you're busy, but if you have discipline, you can really do a fantastic job in bringing in some additional functionality with Vantagepoint. But if you're like me and you maybe have trouble with discipline, that time will race right up to you, and you will have done half of what you thought you did. And you know what? You still go live and everything works fantastically. So that's the fear factor that I was talking about at the beginning. It really doesn't have to be there, and you'll learn it after you get over the hump. But most of you are still on, according to a survey, still on Vision, and you might be experiencing a little fear if you're like most of us. So
yeah. And Brad, I know one of the things that you guys, when we worked with your firm, is originally you had a lot of different reports, for example, and you had identified that your internal team would recreate those. And then as we started down the path, we ended up changing. Can you tell me a little bit about why it is you changed?
Yeah, Sarah picked up on my discipline issues right away. I chose to be the report writer expert when we went to do training, and of course, I didn't get it done. So Full Sail has the bandwidth and the desire, and thankfully they took care of cleaning up a significant amount of our reports that we decided we still had to have, and they will rewrite all of the reports for you if you run out of time. So. Yeah, there's a lot of services that can be utilized if you run out of time, or you run into a pinch, or it's just a little too technical for the expert that we trained, which is certainly possible too. So thank you for reminding me of that. But yeah, it requires a lot of discipline to get that stuff cleaned up. You don't want to put it in one person's pocket like I did. You want to get a team so that it's got some redundancy, and you can start cleaning up all of your old reports, deciding which ones you don't need. It's pretty easy. Some firms literally choose to not do anything with their reports and then find out which ones people really need, and then just write them real quick or create a search on a standard report for them. So yeah, it's Cate mentioned it early on. It's an opportunity to just kind of leave a lot of noise behind. And we did some of that, and it really is helpful.
Yeah.
Sarah, as I was listening to Brad, I think it might be helpful to talk through a little bit of the 3-step process. Sure. Because some of the things that Brad and I are both talking about, we've talked about how leveraging a consultant is important, right? But there are other tools that we have, and it's not just us using these in the entire Deltek ecosystem. A lot of the partners are using them as well. So our 3-step process involves step 1 being the Vantagepoint readiness report, and people will want to think of this as an audit for the system, but what it really does is guide a ton of our cleanup. And it exposes us to like the entire contents of our database. So that's why it's like an audit. This report will literally list everything that you need to know, from like simple duplicates that we all have to like, what are unposted things in the transaction center, or here's a list of all the workflows. So you can see like, oh, wow, those are back to like, 20 years ago. We don't even use those anymore. So a lot of the things that Brad and I have been talking about are kind of illuminated for us in this first step. And that first step is a lot of what I talk about in the first call with you, as well as kind of walking through the rest of the processes. But once you have that first step in hand, you sit down with Brad or another senior consultant who teaches you how to read that report and gives you the initial guidance on how to start that cleanup. So that's a really important, essential tool. And then step 2 and step 3, like this is where the majority of the actual, configuring and security settings and training and testing, the real meat of this upgrade project happens. And we have kind of a menu of things that we can provide to you that are either typical that we see other clients or that, we know you'll need, but it might be customized to your exact needs. But something that is really key is that process often has to be a little fluid. So like what Brad talked about, he had the best intentions. Everyone has the best intentions. But, we all know that phrase, SHIT happens, right? Whether we want it or not. So, the process allowing for needs to not be so rigid that you can't, make some changes when you need to. You can't pivot, so that's an important part that we here at Full Sail Partners take quite seriously because, in order to add value, we really need to know your needs. And as those evolve, the process does as well.
Yeah, I think those are great points. And then did you want to hit upon the third step?
Yeah. So third step, so after we have all of that work and the configuring and the training and testing that happens in step 2, the third step actually often starts to get involved in step 2 when we're doing all of this, more like hourly work. But it also definitely has to happen at the end. So like you probably have experienced in preview environments of Vision in the past, when you have a sandbox or test or preview environment, that is a little playground for you to test out new features or new things that you're doing in the system. So we're really working almost primarily in one of those environments when we're doing all of this configuring. And because the system is so customizable and just the nature of it, we need an ability to copy settings either right before launch. And that usually makes a lot of sense to people because it's like, right, we're doing this all. Now we need to flip a switch and make this our database. But it also needs to happen sometimes as a part of that hourly work or that testing and training to make sure that when we're doing database refreshes, that we don't lose any of those settings as well. So we sell a set of scripts that a few partners in the ecosystem are selling as well. Deltek also released a utility that does this too. So depending on the complexity, what we see in that readiness report will kind of guide us toward which one of those is applicable. But like a lot of things with this upgrade, the more complex your firm is, the larger your firm is, the more, the amount of creativity in terms of custom stuff that's been done to your firm, like Brad talked about at Ware Malcolm, the more likely that you'll need to get the scripts from us versus using what Deltek has, because Deltek is a little more canned, and rightly so, because it needs to apply to a lot of different circumstances.
Yeah. And the other thing that I think is important, we hit upon this related to the fast track, but this really sort of hits upon some of the things that you were talking about, is that the fast track may be when a firm doesn't have, you mentioned all of the extra bells and whistles. They're not using CRM, resource planning, third party. They don't have a lot of workflows, a lot of roles, all those types of things. So the difference between sort of the fast track and what it is that Cate's describing is that you might decide, okay, we're going to go ahead and switch. And then we're going to spend a day or two basically doing all of the stuff that we would do if we, instead of like saving it and preparing it. Like you still might do a preview, test everything out. But when you do it, you're flipping over, you're now doing all of the hard work that you would typically do in a preview. So you're immediately looking at security settings. You're immediately looking at all of the fields and where they're located and then relocating them. You're looking at all of your reports, your save searches, you're recreating all of those on the, before you open it up to everyone. So keep in mind the fast track might be that you're doing all of that hard work. It might take you an entire day to do it, so you're down a day, and people aren't, they're going to have to jot down their timesheet. So there's multiple approaches in how to do it. It's more sometimes about what makes sense, what's unacceptable, what's acceptable to your firm on that approach. And again, as Cate and both Brad have alluded, the more complexity, the more creativity that you've had. We call them the sins across the years sometimes. Also, so things that you need to address, the more you might need to go through a little bit more of a formal process and really the full 3 steps of things. So I'm curious if anybody has any other questions. And if not, Cate and Brad, I'm thinking about like maybe final thoughts in, as we've been doing this, any final thoughts that you might have, and we can also then answer any questions that come in. But maybe Brad, maybe we could start with you. Final thoughts that you have for people as they're considering moving from Vision to Vantagepoint, and sort of lessons learned that you have.
I would say that be realistic about your own personal discipline, and don't. I mean, you can say it all day long. Don't be as afraid of it as you might be. In our experience, we were getting ready to go in 2022, and we were just experiencing some incredible growth. And we just thought, you know what, we can't shake the boat. We can't do it. So we had invested quite a bit of time with Full Sail in training, and honestly, they tried, Sarah and a few other folks tried very hard to talk us out of delaying, because they had invested so much time. I mean, honestly, I can tell from this side, it's an investment. We care, they care, we care about your success. So we put it off. And then guess what? We didn't stop growing. We didn't slow down. So we had to commit, and we finally did it. And I guess just in my mind, I'm thinking of one little tip that I could give everybody right now to help you, regardless of when you decide to go to Vantagepoint, is review your roles, your security roles. Honestly, for us, we were very lucky because we had someone go through and in Vision, while we were still in Vision, just decided to create one role for every single person, put us all in there, and then moved out from there. And I think we went from, I don't know how many, hundreds and hundreds of roles to less than 10 for a company of 900 active users. It can be done. So start looking at your security roles right now, and have some fun with that, actually. And that's a big piece that everybody has to do, regardless of whether you're merging projects and opportunities together or firms and vendors together. That one thing I can say we were very fortunate with. But doing Vantagepoint readiness reports now with some of you folks, that's something you could start on today, whether you even set a date for Vision at Vantagepoint. So I'll leave you with that and let Cate close.
Yeah, and I would say that that's huge. The readiness report really does give you the insight to at least start the process. The cleanup process is probably the most important aspect. And so, Cate, what are your thoughts?
Ooh, my final thoughts. I want to kind of touch upon something that we haven't talked about yet, which is the power of centralization, right? So just the nature of the beast, when those of us that have been in the Deltek, world for a long time, we know, how Vision kind of evolved, and we know how long Deltek took to get Vantagepoint ready for all of us, right? So there was a pretty big gap there. And a lot of firms ended up looking to outside solutions to accomplish things that they either found kind of difficult in Vision, or maybe the timing wasn't right yet, right? But it is a beautiful thing to get all of your data in one place, right? To really, truly make Vantagepoint the source of truth. This is the system. So You may not be able to do that all at your launch. It's like all the things we've been talking about, that depends. But there is far more to do in Vantagepoint than there was in Vision and the ease of use is so significantly improved that you will see the opportunity to really centralize things. So start getting, as you are thinking about your security roles, also start thinking about what else can we systematize? What other processes are not, automated yet? And what else are we paying for out there that we can replace because we're going to be paying for a system anyway, So what else can we do in Vantagepoint to really, truly leverage the system? So start thinking about those things as well.
Yeah. So Brad, we do have a question that came in that I think is for you. So
Okay.
wanting to understand more about multi-company. Was your firm, what did you do related to multi-company?
We were multi-company and multi-currency. And honestly, I didn't think about it. That part came right over. Accounting stuff comes right over.
Yeah.
So you don't, it's mostly project activity and security stuff. But I can honestly say I didn't think one time about it.
I'm wondering if the question is related to maybe the security roles, the number of security roles. Do you feel like that played into security roles there?
Not at all. Not in our environment. That wasn't a consideration at all across companies as far as security. And it might be because we operated very similarly in all of our companies, and essentially they were all under the same control. So.
Yeah, so that is what their question is related. So you could only have 10 roles, or you got it down to 10 roles.
Yes, you definitely can. And it takes a mindset to know that, and it's a style. Like I mentioned, there's styles. You can take a style. We're a very large company, and we didn't want to manage all the different roles constantly as people needed it. So you get one view to everything, and it's relatively liberal. And if you want something else, you ask for it. And then sure, that's how we got it down to maybe 5 roles, but then you end up with 10, and I imagine they might have 15 now, where Malcolm may have 15 or 20 roles. But
right.
Honestly, that's still fantastic, So, that multi-company, multi-currency. I can't think of any issues that we had moving from Vision to Vantagepoint. None.
The settings are nearly the same. So we've had firms that actually implemented multi-company in Vision, before they did the upgrade, simply because the settings do stick. Finance is finance. It doesn't really change. There aren't new ways to do accounting. There's ways that you can improve the processes and automate things, right? But finance is finance. So, that hasn't really changed. Most everything you're doing on the finance side in Vision, you can do in Vantagepoint. It's just there's new functionality to make your life a little easier.
Yeah. So someone else said, they're a small firm, 50 in one office, and she'd like to hear stories of Vantagepoint adoption from firms, 10 to 100 size. I know that I want to say it was about a year ago, we actually had a small firm. We were doing sort of hear from our peers. And so we can actually get you, Maggie, that past LinkedIn Live, where we had that smaller firm join us. And then we also did one in the past where it was multiple firms and we had different sizes represented as well. And so again, really the size, I don't always look necessarily at the size. It's more the complexity of the firm. So are you using finance only? Do you have, because I've had some really sophisticated small firms that were using all kinds of things and very complex systems. So for us, it's less about the size and more about the complexity. Are you just finance? Do you have CRM? Do you have resource planning? Are you using third-party applications that you're connecting to? Are you on the cloud? Are you on premise? So those are the things really for us that we would suggest taking a look at and understanding a little bit more about.
And for you small firms, if just a little plug, because we talked a little bit about on-premise, there are a lot of large organizations where on-premise really makes sense for them. But there were smaller organizations who were on-premise because of fear or for other reasons, or just it was pre-cloud, right? The cloud, looking at what Deltek offers for hosting, or another firm that offers hosting, like we offer hosting, there are a few out there that do, look to the cloud, because it really is a smart idea, especially for those smaller firms, to just get rid of the hardware component as a cost. You have to upgrade your hardware to move to Vantagepoint, and that, hardware is constantly evolving, and it's not getting slower in terms of evolution. It's getting faster, and it's only going to get faster and faster. So if you have the ability to move to the cloud, this is a great time to consider it. And we always recommend moving to the cloud on vision first.
Yes.
Prior to doing the upgrade. It's not a massive change. It feels like it might be, but it's really not. For your users, there will be literally no difference. They just go to a new browser link.
Yep. So, Pat added that they went to the cloud in 2019 and have never regretted it. So,
yeah.
So that's great to hear. And so, and Maggie's just thanking us for addressing her question. And then Lindsay has added there a couple of things. So here's the 5 different firms. If you're looking to hear from their experience with moving to Vantagepoint. And then this is another one that was specific to the small firms. So you can go to also LinkedIn Live, or to LinkedIn to Full Sail Partners, and you can look at our past events, and you can see all of them that we have done. And so Brad and Cate, it was great just chatting with you today, and just hearing the things that you guys have been experiencing with clients. And I really appreciate you giving further insight to people, and also Brad, just your different perspective of being on both sides now. And I really appreciate the audience just for your interactiveness and for asking questions. We love that. So in the future, come back and do more of that. And so thank you also, Lindsay, for helping us to get us the resources that the audience needed. And so thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. If you have any further questions, feel free to reach out to us on our website. You can also simply just email us at info@fullsailpartners.com. And Cate here is actually the person that tends to respond back to people. And so we welcome any questions, guidance. We also have a questionnaire should you want to start the process and start to inquire about that. So we welcome you to reach out to us and see how we might assist you. So thank you so much, everyone.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you all.
Bye.